The hum of the Galactic Concorde's grand assembly chamber vibrated through the floor, a low, thrumming sound that normally signified peace, negotiation, the slow grinding of interstellar bureaucracy. Today, it felt like the prelude to a coming storm. Ambassador Cale Varen stood alone in the center of the vast circular dais. The light of 1,000 distant stars filtered through the crystalline ceiling high above. Around him, in tiered alcoves, sat the gathered delegates of the Concorde, representatives from over 300 species. Most regarded him with a mixture of detached curiosity and thinly veiled contempt. Cale adjusted the collar of his simple, dark Terran Accord uniform. It bore no elaborate markings, no ostentatious displays of rank, a stark contrast to the flowing robes of the multi-limbed Xylos Chancellor, High Speaker Xylos Thane, who hovered on his elevated platform, mandibles clicking with barely concealed irritation. Beside Xylos Thane, the scaled Draken representative, Ambassador Vorlag, flexed a clawed hand on his data slate, his reptilian eyes unblinking and predatory. From the shimmering, translucent sphere of the Lumina delegate, a soft, ethereal glow emanated. Yet Cale knew beneath that serene facade lay the coldest strategic mind in the known galaxy. Ambassador Varen, Xylos Thane's voice resonated throughout the chamber, amplified by ancient sonic dampeners. We convene this emergency session to address the egregious and repeated violations of the Core Systems Treaty by your Terran Accord regarding the Oakhaven Nebula Reclamation Project. Cale remained silent, his gaze steady. He had anticipated this. For generations, humanity had pushed, pleaded, and proved itself only to be met with condescension and obstruction. The Oakhaven Nebula was their latest grievance. A region of space deemed uninhabitable, its stellar nurseries toxic and volatile, it had been a dumping ground for the Concorde's industrial waste for centuries. Then, a mere 3 Terran decades ago, humanity had arrived. They had deployed innovative terraforming technologies, spent untold resources, and sacrificed thousands of lives to stabilize the nebula's rogue energies and transform its barren worlds into vibrant, life-sustaining outposts. Now, with Oakhaven flourishing, the Concorde wanted it back. Not for its strategic value, but for the vast, newly accessible rare earth minerals humanity had painstakingly rendered harvestable. The Oakhaven Nebula, Cale began, his voice calm, cutting through the anticipatory silence, was a designated dead zone for over 400 cycles. No Concorde species would even orbit its treacherous gas giants, let alone attempt settlement. Humanity invested resources, innovation, and lives to make it viable. It is now home to 3 thriving human colonies and dozens of resource extraction platforms, all built by Terran hands, on Terran time, with Terran ingenuity. A low, rumbling chuckle rippled from the Draken Ambassador Vorlag. Ingenuity or desperation, human? Your species always seeks to expand beyond its assigned parameters. The Concorde's expansion protocols clearly state that all newly terraformed sectors must be brought under Concorde jurisdiction for fair distribution. Cale's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Fair distribution. He remembered the reports from Oakhaven, the sudden surge of Concorde survey vessels, the aggressive probes, the unexplained malfunctions in human mining arrays, the accidental collisions with Terran transports. And the one incident that had sealed his resolve. The orbital bombardment of the Aurora Dawn agricultural station disguised as a meteor shower. 1,000 souls, mostly children and elderly, perished in the cold void, their lives extinguished for a fabricated protocol. Fair distribution, Cale repeated, his voice still low, but with an underlying current of steel. Is that what you call the seizure of our vital resource convoys en route from Kepler 186F? Is that what you call the unexplained disappearance of our deep space prospectors near the Xylos-controlled Viridian Belt? high speaker Xylos Thane's mandibles clicked rapidly. Those incidents were regrettable, Ambassador, isolated acts by independent actors. The Concord condemns all unauthorized hostile actions. However, we are here to discuss your people's continued refusal to vacate Oakhaven. Your military presence there, specifically your newly commissioned Sentinel-class defense platforms, constitutes a blatant act of aggression against Concord authority. Kale looked from Xylos Thane to Vorlag, then to the luminous serene sphere. He saw no regret in their expressions, only calculated resolve. They saw humanity as a rising tide that needed to be contained, pushed back into its allotted, humble corner of the galaxy. They believed humanity could be bullied, could be broken. The Sentinel platforms, Kale stated, were deployed after multiple unprovoked incursions into Oakhaven's sovereign space. They are defensive, purely defensive. A human definition of defensive often involves disproportionate force. Ambassador, Vorlag sneered, his voice a guttural rasp. Your history is replete with examples of overzealous responses. A tremor ran through Kale's hand, a ghost of the fury he kept caged. They knew nothing of human history. They knew nothing of the fires humanity had walked through, the countless trials that had forged its resilience. They saw only a young species, aggressive and ambitious, and assumed weakness beneath the bluster. They assumed they could break humanity's will just as they had broken so many other nascent civilizations. The Lumina delegate's sphere pulsed softly, its voice a melodious whisper that nevertheless cut through the chamber like ice. The Concord's offer is simple, Ambassador. Withdraw your defense fleet from Oakhaven within 3 standard cycles. Cede control of all established Terran outposts within the nebula to a Concord Oversight Committee. In return, we will forgive your past transgressions and offer your Accord a non-voting observer status within the Concord's Outer Reach Trade Guild. This is a magnanimous offer, considering your violations. Kale's gaze flickered to the vast, empty space where humanity's designated observer seat sat, a testament to decades of empty promises. Non-voting, always non-voting. Humanity had offered its ingenuity, its unique adaptability to extreme environments, its tireless drive for exploration. They had developed warp drives that doubled Concord efficiency, designed medical breakthroughs that saved millions of alien lives, and discovered resource veins that fueled entire sectors. And in return, they were offered a silent seat in the cheap seats. The Xylos Chancellor added, "This is your last opportunity, Ambassador Varen, to avoid the consequences of continued defiance. The Concord does not wish for wider engagement, but it is prepared to enforce its laws." The threat was clear. Economic strangulation, followed by military intervention. They believed humanity would fold, that the Terran Accord would buckle under the pressure. They thought they could simply take Oakhaven, extinguish humanity's spark, and move on. Kale took a slow, deliberate breath. He looked around the vast chamber, at the smug faces, the dismissive gestures, the casual arrogance of species who had never known true hardship, never pushed beyond the comfortable confines of their established order. He saw the ghosts of Oakhaven, the faces of the children of Aurora Dawn, the unreturned prospectors, the broken families. He saw the centuries of humanity's striving, the endless rejections, the constant underestimation. And in that moment, something inside Kale Varen snapped, not in anger but in cold, surgical clarity. He had brought data, testimony, pleas for understanding. He had played by their rules, worn their robes of diplomacy. But they had answered with threats, with theft, with the downfall of innocent lives. They didn't want diplomacy, they wanted submission. He stepped forward, away from the designated ambassadorial marker, moving closer to the central console. The chamber's ambient hum seemed to intensify, anticipating his words. "Consequences," Kale stated, his voice now devoid of any warmth, any trace of his earlier measured calm. It was flat, unyielding like granite. You speak of consequences, high speaker. You have no concept of what that word truly means, not for humanity. The Xylo's Chancellor's mandibles clicked, a sound of annoyance. Ambassador, do not mistake our patience for weakness. We will not tolerate insolence. Kale ignored him. He looked directly at the luminous sphere, then at the Draken's reptilian eyes. For too long, you have treated us as an unruly child, a resource to be exploited, a threat to be contained. You have taken our innovations, scorned our contributions, and laughed at our pleas for justice. A ripple of murmurs spread through the council. This was not the expected diplomatic rebuttal. This was different. You have believed that our strength lies in our words, Kale continued, his voice rising, filling the vast hall, that our restraint is a sign of our fear. You thought you could push us, corner us, bleed us dry, and we would simply perish. He paused, letting the silence expand, heavy with unspoken tension. His eyes, normally a warm hazel, were now chips of flint. Let me be clear, Kale's voice echoed, each word a hammer blow against the polished composure of the Concorde. Humanity does not beg, humanity does not break, and when cornered, humanity does not simply endure. He raised his hand, not in a gesture of surrender, but of command. A subtle shimmer appeared beside him, a holographic projection of extraordinary clarity and detail. It was not a pre-recorded message, it was a live feed. The image resolved into a dizzying tactical display. Hundreds, then thousands of vessels, each one unmistakably Terran. Not the ships the Concorde had been allowed to survey or had faced in minor skirmishes. These were sleek, black, predatory shapes, their energy signatures cloaked until the last second. They warped into existence, not from pre-planned jump points, but from the very fabric of deep space, appearing silently behind key Concorde defense fleets, above vital trade hubs, and around the unsuspecting peacekeeping blockades that had been harassing human convoys for months. A high-pitched, mechanical shriek erupted from the Xylo's Chancellor's platform. What? What is this deception? These vessels are unknown. Kale smiled then, a cold, utterly humorless baring of teeth that sent a shiver down the spines of even the most ancient delegates. Deception? No, High Speaker, this is an awakening. The holographic display shifted. One of the Concorde's most heavily armed peacekeeping cruisers, the arbitrator-class vessel Justicar's Gaze, was shown on screen. It had been sitting in geosynchronous orbit above an independent free-market world for weeks, its vast kinetic cannons perpetually trained on any vessel not bearing a Concorde transit tag. It was a symbol of their absolute control. Suddenly, two Terran vessels, unlike anything ever catalogued by Concorde intelligence, flickered into existence directly behind the Justicar's Gaze. They were small, almost impossibly fast. No energy signatures, no visible weapons fire, just two blurs of motion. There was a faint, almost inaudible shimmer in space, a brief distortion, and then the Justicar's Gaze, a vessel thought to be invulnerable to anything less than a full-fleet assault, simply went dark. Not exploded, not torn apart. It just ceased to exist as an operational entity. Its engines died, its shields collapsed, its internal lights flickered and then vanished entirely. It became a dead hulk, drifting silently. A wave of absolute terror swept through the council chamber. Gasps, cries, and horrified whispers erupted from every alcove. The Draken Ambassador Vorlag recoiled, his scales shifting to a pale, sickly green. The luminous sphere dimmed, its ethereal glow faltering. "Impossible!" shrieked a delegate from a species known for its advanced warp technology. No weapon known to the Concorde could achieve such silent neutralization. Kale's voice cut through the rising panic, calm amidst the storm. "You spoke of silent neutralization, Ambassador. You meant the fate of the Aurora Dawn Station, did you not? The thousands of souls who perished without a scream." He paused again, letting the implications sink in. The Terran vessels hadn't destroyed the Justicar's gaze. They had simply disabled it with surgical, undetectable precision. A demonstration. A warning. The ship was intact but lifeless. The holographic display expanded, showing similar incidents across different sectors. A Concorde orbital defense array, thought to be impregnable, suddenly broadcasting only static. A key Concorde interdictor grid, designed to cut off enemy supply lines, now offline and drifting. Not a single shot fired, no explosions, just silence and consequences. Kale looked directly at the Xylo's Chancellor, whose numerous eyes were now wide with genuine terror. "You wanted to enforce your laws, High Speaker." Kale's voice vibrated with a contained, terrifying power. "You wanted to show humanity what defiance would cost. You wanted war." He leaned into the microphone, his voice dropping to a low, chilling growl that somehow reached every corner of the chamber, cutting through the rising tide of panic like a razor blade. "You just got it!" The chamber exploded into utter chaos. Delegates scrambled, security drones whirred to life, and the Xylo's Chancellor's pleas for order were swallowed by the rising tide of fear. Humanity had been pushed too far, and now the galaxy would feel the tremor of their unleashed will. To find out what happens next in this unfolding galactic confrontation, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments below. What do you think humanity's next move will be? And where in the galaxy are you listening from? The grand chamber of the Galactic Concorde descended into pandemonium. Delegates, accustomed to the slow, predictable dance of diplomacy, now clawed at translator devices, their alien voices rising in a cacophony of fear and outrage. Security drones, sleek and polished, whirred into motion, but their usual intimidating presence was lost amidst the frantic chaos. A shimmering, gelatinous ambassador from the Nari quadrant slipped from his liquid-filled transport, his form writhing on the polished floor as he flailed, a desperate sound escaping his unseen mouth. Ambassador Kale Varen remained utterly still, a human eye in the center of the swirling storm. This was it, the true beginning. Not the first shot, but the first undeniable declaration of a conflict they had already been fighting in the shadows for far too long. He watched the High Speaker, Xylo's Thane, slam a clawed appendage onto the armrest of his floating podium, a futile gesture. "Guards, detain the human. He has violated every protocol." Xylo's Thane's voice, usually so commanding, cracked with barely concealed terror. Kale's gaze, cold and unwavering, locked onto the Xylo's leader. "Do not!" His voice was not loud, but it carried an undeniable weight, a finality that made the Concorde guards, mid-stride, freeze in place. It was the tone of a verdict delivered, not a plea made. He turned slightly, indicating the holographic feed that still hung in the air beside him. The single screen split, now displaying 3 separate, simultaneous live streams. One showed the drifting, inert hulk of the Justicar's gaze, a silent monument to Terran capability. The second displayed the Oakhaven Nebula, but not as the Concorde knew it. Hidden vessels, once believed to be myths, shimmered into view around newly fortified Terran outposts, their energy shields pulsing with a silent, defiant power. The third feed was the most chilling. A rapid succession of images showing Concorde supply convoys, not destroyed, but systematically rerouted, their contents being offloaded by human crews at designated collection points. Critical resources, once flowing freely to the Concorde's core worlds, were now being redirected to supply the very sectors they had sought to starve. "You thought our fleet was based on the schematics we sold you," Kale stated, his voice slow, measured, as he began to pace towards the High Speaker's platform. "The older models, the outdated weapon systems, that was bait. What's arriving now, what's already here, is the true Terran Accord fleet." Behind him, the frozen Concorde guards shifted uneasily. One took an imperceptible step forward, his multi-jointed leg twitching. A tiny, almost undetectable chip embedded in Kale's palm sent a silent signal. A profound tremor shook the entire chamber. The floor beneath them shuddered, the crystalline ceiling flickered, and several smaller lighting fixtures burst, raining down a shower of sparks like rogue fireflies. Screams escalated, morphing from panic into outright terror. It was a shockwave, controlled and precise, originating deep beneath the Council complex. One of the Concorde's main planetary defense relays, the very system that monitored all orbital traffic, had just been permanently silenced. Kale finally allowed a sliver of the fury he had suppressed for so long to enter his voice. "You bombed Aurora Dawn, a farming station. You assassinated our envoys on New Eden. You sabotaged our trade routes and unleashed privateers on civilian transports. You called this peace?" The Draken ambassador Vorlag shrieked, his serpentine neck flaring. "We were within our rights. Humanity expanded without Concorde approval?" Kale stepped closer to Vorlag's pedestal, his reflection starkly visible in the Draken's compound eyes. His voice was a surgical instrument. "Funny, you didn't care about approval when your fleets were seizing our mining stations or when your enforcer units were eliminating unarmed prospectors." "This is madness," cried the gelatinous ambassador from the Nari quadrant, his form wobbling precariously. "This violates every intergalactic statute." "Statute?" Kale snapped, cutting him off. "Who do you think wrote those statutes? You did, all of you, for yourselves. For centuries, Earth played by your rules, hoping for a true seat at your table. We earned it, we bled for it, and you still treated us like dogs." A heavy, suffocating silence descended. Kale walked back to the center of the chamber, his bootsteps echoing like distant thunder in the cavernous hall. "When you struck Aurora Dawn, I held my tongue. When your Concorde branded our defense forces as aggressors, I still came back here. I brought data, testimony, evidence. But every time I showed you truth, you shoved it back in my face with threats and insults." He looked around the chamber, his gaze locking with every species that had dismissed humanity as young, aggressive, primitive. "We sought justice. You gave us only graves." Another screen lit up on the holographic display. This time, it showed the orbit of Xylos Prime, the capital world of the High Speaker's own people. A frantic transmission blinked across it. "Warning! Unidentified fleet detected, engaging defensive posture." Concorde warships, sleek and imposing, scrambled to form defensive lines around Xylos Prime. Too late. Terran Ghost-class destroyers, cloaked until the very last nanosecond, flickered into existence directly within their formation. One after another, their hulls glowed with a fierce blue energy as their rail cannons fired kinetic rounds the size of starships. No one in the Council chamber made a sound. All that could be heard was the distant, digital roar of collapsing pride, streaming live on 100 displays. The Xylos Chancellor Veyron leaned forward, his voice suddenly small, devoid of its usual arrogance. What do you want?" Kale smiled then, a narrow, unnerving curve of his lips. It was not a smile of mirth, but of cold, relentless intent. Not wide, just enough to show it was never about negotiation anymore. "You'll return the Oakhaven Nebula, every station, every moon, every inch of space your empires attempted to seize from Terran reach." Veyron looked like he wanted to object, but Kale didn't let him. "You will pay reparations for the Aurora Dawn. You will issue a public apology. Recorded, unedited, unqualified." The Draken ambassador Vorlag hissed, his mandibles twitching. "This is coercion." "No," Kale said. "This is consequence." He walked over to the master podium, the one reserved only for the Concorde's head speaker. Slowly, deliberately, he placed his hand on it. No one moved to stop him now. They were too afraid he would shatter the entire structure if they dared. "You will recognize Earth as an equal. Not a servant, not a tool, not your colony." A human assistant, Lieutenant Anya Rin, Kale's sole ally in that chamber, approached and handed him a data shard. Kale slotted it into the podium's console. Instantly, every screen in the chamber lit up with a single bold declaration. Terran Accord, Declaration of Unilateral Sovereignty. Immediate ratification demanded. If you do not sign this, Kale's voice dropped, each syllable a quiet, lethal hammer blow, in the next 12 standard hours, Earth will not stop at your borders. We will dismantle your fleets, neutralize your military outposts, and leave your empires in dust. A long, suffocating pause. Then, from the highest tier of the council, a delegate finally spoke. It was one of the elder species, the Veli, an ancient dying race known for their wisdom and detachment, their translucent skin shimmering faintly. "Ambassador," the Veli elder said quietly, his voice like rustling leaves. "You are burning centuries of interspecies diplomacy with a single match." Kale looked him straight in the eye. "Good," he said, "let it burn." He walked out of that chamber like a man leaving a funeral. Except this time, it wasn't humans in the caskets. It was their arrogance, their dominance, their assumed superiority. Aboard the Indomitable, Earth's first fully autonomous flagship, Kale stood by the viewport, watching the stars blur past as the massive vessel moved with silent purpose through the void. Orders were already being transmitted across the Terran Accord's secure networks. Their fleets would not strike unless provoked further, but they held the noose tightly now, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. He went to the war room. A handful of admirals and senior officers were already gathered, their faces grim but resolute, watching the Concorde's communication channels. The chatter was a digital storm of panic. Some species wanted to surrender immediately, others begged for negotiation. A foolish few, still clinging to outdated pride, began recalling reinforcements to their core systems. "Let them," Kale muttered, his eyes on the holographic display of Concorde fleet movements. "We have blueprints for every vessel. We've studied every tactical weakness. Earth didn't just prepare for this day. We spent 50 years crafting it." The plan was never mere vengeance. It was respect, the kind earned in blood and fire. Lieutenant Anya Rin entered the war room, her face pale, but her eyes bright with a fierce, quiet resolve. "Sir," she said, her voice steady, "word from Earth Command. The President has signed full authorization for planetary defense strikes if provoked. We're officially at military readiness level 1. Kale turned to her. She was barely 20, too young to remember the old humiliations. The endless years Earth had sought admission into the Concorde and been laughed out the door. Too young to remember the time humans were forced to wear locator chips when traveling to other worlds like pets. But she would remember this day. Everyone would. "Conflict was never our first option," Kale said, looking out at the stars again. "But when you corner a species long enough, eventually it stops trying to be civil." The next 12 hours were a blur of what the Concorde desperately tried to portray as diplomacy, but Kale knew it was simply damage control. Every minute, new communiques flashed across the command deck's central table, translated from a dozen languages, most of them laced with thinly veiled panic. Delegates who once called Earth a primitive rock with ambition were now begging for an audience. Some offered bribes, others pleaded for ceasefires, and a few, still clutching their outdated pride, issued threats, empty ones. Kale didn't respond to any of them. Instead, he walked the length of the Indomitable. She was nearly a city in space, humming with nuclear pulse engines and the silent menace of orbital warheads that had never seen battle until now. As he passed crew members, they saluted. Their faces were hardened, not out of hate, but out of exhaustion. They had watched the Concorde walk over humanity for years, watched as their colonies were stripped for resources and their scientists mysteriously disappeared during Concorde inspections. They weren't hungry for bloodshed. They were hungry for justice. He entered the observation deck and stared out at the distant swirl of Concorde space. An entire sector built on peace treaties no one honored, the illusion of unity, the mirage of mutual respect. Behind him, Fleet Admiral Harrow cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, his voice like gravel. 10 more systems have just gone dark. Looks like the Concorde is retreating into their core worlds." "Let them," Kale said without turning. "They'll either sign or they'll feel the full weight of our resolve." Harrow walked up beside him. Older than Kale by 15 years, Harrow had served through the colony raids. He had seen good men and women eliminated by Concorde mercenaries, while Earth was told to be patient. He wasn't a man who flinched easily. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered. "You think I went too far?" Kale asked. Harrow was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I think we waited too long." He handed Kale a data pad. "Concorde has scheduled an emergency vote. They're rattled. You've got support from the Rim Coalition now. Even a few of the mid-core traders are siding with Earth." "Good," Kale said. "Fear is finally doing what reason couldn't." He paused, then added, "How's Aurora Dawn?" Harrow's jaw tightened. "We have recovery teams on the ground, but there's nothing left. Radiation levels are critical. We'll be burying pieces for years." Kale nodded once, slowly. That was the thing about galactic politics. The downfall of thousands never made the headlines. It was always just a strategic misstep or a tragic event pending investigation. Kale had seen too many parents kneel in the ash of their homes to stomach another condolence letter. A message pinged across Kale's interface. Harrow read it over his shoulder. "Concorde transmission encrypted, marked urgent." Kale opened it. A hologram shimmered to life in front of them. The image of Chancellor Veyron, the Xylo's leader who once sneered every time Kale spoke, now looked like a being clinging to a cliff. His voice was polished, but the fear leaked through. "Ambassador Veyron, we acknowledge Earth's grievances. The Concorde is prepared to discuss terms, but we request a temporary suspension of your fleet's advance while negotiations are underway." Kale didn't even blink. He pressed one button. "Decline." Another ping came seconds later from the Neller delegate, more cautious, more subtle. "Earth has earned its place. We propose a new Concorde structure with shared leadership. Let us talk." Another ping. Another. Now they were tripping over each other to apologize. The same species that wouldn't grant humanity basic rights were now painting them as saviors. Convenient when they were the ones staring down the barrels of Terran warships. Kale turned to Harrow. "They think this is about the Concorde." Harrow nodded. "It's not." "No," Kale agreed. "This is about telling the galaxy that Earth doesn't get stepped on." He stepped away from the window and headed back toward the war room. The next part would be delicate but necessary. His declaration wasn't just for vengeance, it was for reshaping the future. Earth would never beg. They weren't just joining the table, they were flipping it over. The war room was alive with energy. Dozens of officers lined the central holo map. Systems blinked red where Earth's fleets had blockaded Concorde supply routes. Key trade sectors were already under siege. Not attacked, just held. Humanity didn't need to fire to win. They just needed to choke the galaxy's oxygen supply until it begged for air. Kale stepped into the center and cleared his throat. "Put it on record," he said. "Begin transmission." The hologram lights adjusted as cameras locked onto him. This message wasn't just for the Concorde. It was for every planet that ever wondered if Earth would fight back. "This is Ambassador Veyron of the Terran Accord," Kale began. "To the Concorde and all aligned empires, you've made your position clear, and now so have we." He paused just long enough for the words to burn. "Effective immediately, Earth declares unilateral sovereignty over all previously disputed sectors. Any attempt to breach these borders will be considered an act of war." He shifted slightly. His voice dropped lower, quieter, deadlier. "You treated Earth like a resource. You robbed us. You mocked us. You slaughtered our citizens and called it policy. You thought we were too small, too fragmented, too human to fight back." He looked into the lens like it was the collective eyes of a galaxy gone mad. "But we are human, and that's why we don't stop." He pressed the final command. The message was beamed across 1,000 systems, translated into every tongue, sent to every channel. By the time he stepped away, the conflict had already changed shape. It wasn't Earth versus the Concorde anymore. It was Earth, surrounded by billions watching quietly from the edge's species who had also been crushed, cheated, exploited. And now they saw humanity standing up. Maybe they weren't just avenging their own. Maybe they were starting something bigger. Later that night, Kale found himself sitting alone in his quarters. The hum of the Indomitable's engines was the only sound. He should have felt victorious, but it wasn't victory he wanted. It was justice. A small tablet sat on his desk. On it was the final video recovered from Aurora Dawn, a father shielding his child as the orbital firestorm consumed their farm. Kale hadn't deleted it. Couldn't. He needed to remember. There was a soft knock at his door. Lieutenant Rhin stepped in. Young, quiet, loyal to the end. "Sir, I know it's late, but—" she hesitated. "What is it?" Kale asked, not unkindly. "The Rim freeholds just sent word. They're abandoning their treaties with the Concorde. They want to meet with us." Kale stared at her for a second. Then he nodded. "Schedule it." She looked like she wanted to say more. Finally, she did. "Did we go too far, sir?" Kale looked at the images on the video again, dust falling from the ceiling. The scream that never finished before the feed cut out. "No," he said, "we finally went far enough." The Rim freeholds were a strange network. Scattered across the outermost edges of known space, they were a loose affiliation of merchant worlds, independent stations, nomadic colonies, and battered civilizations that had survived by staying just outside the Concorde's grasp. Too distant to control, too stubborn to ignore. For centuries, they had been dismissed as renegades and smugglers. Now they were requesting an alliance with Earth. Kale stood aboard the Indomitable's primary negotiation hall, staring across the holographic table at 3 Rim representatives. They appeared via projection no one trusted face-to-face contact yet, but even through the shimmer of the hologram, Kale could feel the shift in tone. Their voices weren't soft. They were cautious, yes, but respectful. No more smirks, no more mocking inflections when saying Terran. "We've watched your fleets dismantle Concorde patrols like they were made of paper," said one of them, an old man from Gross Roman 3. His face a roadmap of scars and synthetic eye lenses. "We've despised the Concorde for decades, but no one ever dared challenge them like you just did." Kale didn't answer right away. He let the moment sit. "We didn't challenge them out of ego," he said. "They earned it over centuries of oppression." Another representative, a woman with one cybernetic arm and tribal tattoos down her neck, leaned forward. "We know. We've buried our own under Concorde fire. We just thought we'd be next once you were done." "You won't be," Kale replied. "Not if you stand with us." That got their attention. The freeholds didn't fear conflict. They lived in it. What they feared was betrayal. They had seen too many powers make promises, then send bombs when no one was watching. So Kale spelled it out plainly. "You won't be colonized. You won't be taxed. You won't be disarmed. You stand with Earth and we treat you like kin." "And the Concorde?" the Gross elder asked, his voice low. "They won't survive the cycle," Kale said flatly. "One way or another, their rule is at an end." Silence. Then the nods came. One by one, each representative activated their projection's equivalent of a signature. An old symbol appeared, half Earth insignia, half Freehold banner. A new alliance born not from politics, but from shared scars. 3 hours later, Fleet Admiral Harrow walked into Kale's office with a grim look. "They're cracking," he said, dropping a data pad onto Kale's desk. "Concorde's losing its grip. Trade guilds are pulling out. The Mid-Core Republic just declared neutrality." "Cowards," Kale muttered. "Perhaps," Harrow shrugged. "But that's what happens when the food shipments stop. You don't need kinetic weapons when you've got control of the routes." It was true. Humanity hadn't fired a single kinetic warhead in days. They didn't need to. Their fleet blockades now strangled 7 of the 11 major hyperlanes used by Concord-aligned species. Without those routes, nothing moved. No food, no medicine, no supplies. A slow end, wrapped in silence. Harrow handed Cale another data pad. "This one's uglier." Cale glanced down. Satellite footage. The planet Deleuze, an industrial hub once loyal to the Concorde, was in flames. Civil unrest had erupted when food shortages hit critical levels. Civilians stormed government bunkers. Military units refused orders. "Internal conflict?" Cale asked. "Looks like it," Harrow confirmed. "That's the thing about empires. They look invincible until the bottom falls out, and once people realize the fear was fake, they stop kneeling." Cale tapped the edge of the data pad. "Send a relief ship. Quietly, supplies only, no troops." Harrow raised an eyebrow. "Helping a Concorde world?" "Helping people," Cale clarified. "That's how we truly prevail. Not just with might, but with decency, something the Concorde never understood." Harrow gave a rare nod of approval. "You're turning into a diplomat, Varen." Cale smirked. "Don't insult me." That night, he stood alone in the Indomitable's observation bay again, watching the stars drift by like ghosts. His reflection in the glass looked harder than he remembered. A few more lines etched around his eyes. Eyes darker than before, like something inside him had been replaced with cold iron. Part of him missed the days when Earth just wanted a seat at the table, when he believed peace could be bought with patience and protocol. But Aurora Dawn had burned that belief to ash, and now there was only the mission. A chime rang behind him. He turned. Lieutenant Ryn stepped in again, holding a smaller data pad this time. "There's something you need to see," she said quietly. Cale took it. The screen flickered on. It was a private message, not Concorde-coded, not from Earth, something older. He played it. A shaky voice came through, filtered and encrypted. Male, nervous. "This is Operative 771 embedded in Concorde Intelligence Sector 9. They know." The feed glitched, scrambled, then returned. "The Xylos and Draken have a fallback plan. If Earth's advance continues, they're preparing to activate a dead world protocol. Weaponized extinction-level payloads. 4 targets. One of them is Earth." Silence, then static. Message ended. Cale stared at the screen, his hand clenched tight. He didn't say anything for nearly a minute. Then he looked at Ryn. "Get Harrow, get every department head. 5 minutes, War Council. Now." By the time everyone was in the war room, the mood had shifted. The previous calm, the confidence, was replaced by a cold edge. "They wouldn't dare," one general said, his voice strained. "Activating extinction weapons is species-wide self-destruction." "They would," Cale said, his voice flat. "Because they're losing, and they've never truly lost before." Harrow slammed a fist on the table. "We stop now, we lose everything." "We don't stop," Cale countered. "We strike first." That got everyone's attention. "Sir," Ryn asked carefully. "We take out the fallback bases," Cale said. "The storage facilities, their last cards." "How do we even find them?" another officer asked. Cale turned the table display on and tapped in a code. The map shifted. Earth intelligence had been busy. Satellite scans, informant data, deep space probes. 3 targets flashed red, one on a frozen moon in the Own Belt, one buried under a former Concorde prison asteroid, and one moving aboard a mobile stealth carrier that hadn't docked in decades. "Commando teams?" Harrow asked. "No," Cale said. "They'd never get close enough." "Then what?" Cale looked up, and for a moment, the fire in him burned brighter than ever. "We send a message." An hour later, Earth's deep space comms lit up again. A new broadcast, uncoded, unfiltered. And this time, Cale didn't bother with political nuance. He looked straight into the camera and said what needed to be said. "To the Concorde High Command, we know what you're hiding. We know about the Dead World Protocol, the payloads, the desperation." He paused just enough to let it sink in. You thought you could threaten us with extinction. That fear would make us crawl back. You were wrong. A second screen appeared beside him. Footage from the first strike, one of their hidden depots, a storage facility on a remote frozen moon reduced to a flash of blue fire. No survivors. A clean hit. Kale turned back to the primary feed. We've neutralized one. The rest are next. We will hunt down every secret weapon, every last contingency, and we'll dismantle your legacy piece by piece. He leaned in, his voice sharp now. You wanted conflict. You wanted terror. You wanted Earth to fall on its knees. He stared, unblinking. You just gave us permission to fight like we never have before. The war room was silent after the broadcast. Even after Kale had signed off and the message had been pushed across every network in Concord space, no one in the command chamber spoke. There wasn't applause, there weren't cheers, just silence. And that was exactly what Kale wanted. Let the Concord hear it. Let every world know. Let the ones hiding their last weapons understand they were no longer in control. The silence was power, not because it screamed, but because it didn't need to. Kale stepped away from the terminal, his jaw clenched. His mind wasn't even on the destruction they had just caused. It was already on the next two targets. The second one would be harder. Hidden on a former prison asteroid, heavily guarded, with a rotating crew and automated defense systems that hadn't seen a shutdown command in 2 decades. That facility wasn't designed to be visited. It was designed to disappear, but they had eyes inside. Operative 771 had sent one more encrypted burst. A layout, security shifts, the exact corridor housing the extinction payload, an orbital kinetic lance capable of cracking open Earth's crust. If it was ever deployed, it would tear the planet in half like rotten fruit. We go now, Kale told Harrow. No Concord debates, no warnings. Harrow's face was pale but solid. You're sending the fleet. Kale shook his head. This one needs a message, not just destruction. A reminder? Harrow raised a brow. You want to go in yourself? Kale didn't answer. He didn't need to. The drop pod slammed into the ice field of the prison asteroid like a meteor. No warnings, no preamble. 1 minute there was silence. Next, 6 humans stood on its crust, ghost-like through the swirling snowstorm, their armor coated in black obsidian camo, visors flickering green with synchronized HUDs. Kale was one of them. No figurehead speeches now, no broadcasts. This was personal. Every person on his team had lost someone on Aurora Dawn. They didn't bring diplomats. They brought soldiers. The kind the galaxy had forgotten Earth still had. They moved silently over the ridgeline, crouched low between fractured ice and buried calm towers. The Xylo's guards never saw them coming. They cut their sensors, jammed their drones, and neutralized the first 3 sentries without firing a shot. Inside, it was worse. Dim corridors, rusted bulkheads, the stench of rot, oil, and long-forgotten prisoners. They had turned the old cells into storage vaults, packing them with munitions, chemical stockpiles, and finally, near the core, a black cube sealed behind 6 formidable security doors. The payload! 6 of them stood there staring at it. Kale stepped forward, placed a small plasma charge on the casing, just enough to breach. Then he paused. Inside that crate was something designed to erase his species, built by aliens who thought humans were replaceable. That weapon was their answer to rebellion, and part of Kale, a deeply buried, furious part, wanted to detonate it right there. Let the walls shake. Let the crater be a warning, but then he remembered the video. The father, the child, Aurora Dawn, they hadn't perished for vengeance. They perished hoping someone would stop it from happening again. He turned to the team. We disarm it, not destroy it. We take it home. We let them see it, not just burn it. Let them know how close they came and why they'll never come that close again. Extraction was brutal. The alarms finally triggered. Enemy fighters swept down like vultures, their energy weapons hot, engines screaming. The Indomitable's strike group covered them, blue flame lighting up the void as rail cannon fire punched through the skies. They escaped with the payload. No casualties. Not this time. The moment they docked, Kale walked the captured weapon right into the broadcast chamber. He didn't give the Concorde a chance to deny it. The weapon was on full display. Engraved serial numbers, target data, launch conditions, Earth listed first. "This is what they were saving," Kale said on the live feed. "This is what your peacekeepers built while we begged for inclusion." Gasps flooded the Concorde floor. Most of them were performative, but Kale didn't care. He wasn't speaking for them anymore. He was speaking to everyone else. "Earth isn't here to seize power," Kale stated. "We're here to break the system that built weapons like this and called them insurance." He stared into the camera. "You don't negotiate with people holding extinction in their hands. You stop them." But later that night, Kale cracked. He didn't plan to, didn't want to, but it came. He sat alone in his quarters, staring at the weapon's casing. They had locked it in a sealed chamber for now, behind 6 layers of security, but his mind kept pulling him back to it. Every second he stared, it was like he could hear Aurora Dawn again. Hear the static, the screams, the cut-off pleas. A voice behind him spoke. "You can't carry it all alone, Kale." He turned. Admiral Harrow stood in the doorway. He looked older than Kale had ever seen him. "You disarmed their deadliest weapon," Harrow said. "You've won over the freeholds. Even the traitors are aligning with Earth now. Why does it still feel like a funeral in here?" Kale looked down. "Because I'm still angry," he muttered. "Still waiting for someone to say we went too far, and no one has, not yet." Harrow stepped in slowly, arms folded behind his back. "You know what I realized watching you in that chamber?" he asked. Kale said nothing. "You're not doing this out of hatred. You're doing it because you still believe something better can be built after the dust settles." Kale scoffed. "Don't put me on a pedestal, Harrow." Harrow smiled grimly. "Not trying to, I'm just saying don't lose that hope. Don't let their darkness become yours." He turned to leave, then stopped. "You're not the man who unleashed the fire on Aurora Dawn," he said over his shoulder. "But you might become him if you forget why you started this." Then he was gone. The next day, a message came from an unlikely source. One of the Concorde's original founders, the Veli, an ancient dying race with no army, no weapons, just memory. They requested an audience alone. Kale agreed. Their envoy appeared via hologram, a translucent-skinned elder with no name, just a designation. Speaker of the memory rings. "Ambassador," he said, his voice calm. "We have watched you watch the Concorde, watch this conflict unfold." Kale said nothing. "The galaxy changes. The system we helped build, once meant for balance, has become rot. You have exposed it, and for that you will be remembered." Kale narrowed his eyes. "You're not here to offer thanks." "No," the elder admitted. "We are here to offer something else. Access." Kale leaned in. "We know the location of the final payload," the elder said quietly. "The one you have not found, the mobile stealth carrier, the one still hunting Earth." That froze Kale's blood. "How?" "We built the cloaking systems," the elder said, "long before the Concorde turned them to conflict." He uploaded the coordinates, then added, "End this, Ambassador, so the galaxy can begin again." The Veli's transmission came with exact coordinates, not just a system, but a path. A constantly shifting route in deep space used by a stealth-class war carrier operating under Concorde Black protocols. The Concorde never even officially acknowledged its existence. It was their myth, their failsafe, their final reset button should everything fall apart. Now it was real, and it was hunting Earth. Kale stood in the war room aboard the Indomitable, watching the coordinates flicker across the 3D holo map. Even with full power, their scanners couldn't detect the ship directly. It moved like a ghost, slipping between gravitational shadows, hiding in the turbulence of collapsing stars. Admiral Harrow stared at the data with Kale. "That carrier isn't just cloaked, it's buried inside space-time itself. You can't detect it with normal sensors." "Then we don't use normal sensors," Kale said. He turned to Lieutenant Rin. Deploy the Vanguard beacons. Full spectrum ping, no filters. Let's shake the shadows loose. She hesitated. Sir, pinging deep space at that frequency will reveal our own fleet positions. I'm counting on it, Kale said. She gave a stiff nod and moved out. Harrow raised an eyebrow. You're baiting it? Kale nodded. It's been hiding because it doesn't know we're ready to face absolute destruction for this. Within the hour, hundreds of beacons launched from strike cruisers and recon ships scattered across the surrounding sectors. They fired bursts of raw signal, unfiltered, untuned, meant to disrupt every particle and ripple across nearby space. The galaxy blinked, and there it was, faint, fuzzy, but visible for just 2 seconds. A massive Concorde war carrier, 3 kilometers long, shaped like a scythe, covered in energy-absorbing plating, its engine trails masked by gravity distortions. It had been hiding behind the event horizon of a rogue black hole, skimming the edge of annihilation just to stay invisible. But Earth's signal bursts had reached it, and now it knew humanity knew. They didn't wait. 10 destroyers immediately warped toward its last known vector, forming a hammer formation, something designed not to destroy, but to corner. The Indomitable held position from afar, acting as central command. It wasn't just about eliminating a ship. This was the last card, the final threat, the one the Concorde believed would terrify Earth back into submission. If they could neutralize it, the conflict would be over. But things never go that cleanly. Within 15 minutes, the carrier responded, not with communication, not with demands, but with launches. Thousands of autonomous drones, silent, invisible, swarm-like, began to spread across nearby sectors. Each one carried smaller-scale payloads, not world-ending, but enough to cripple a fleet if they struck in concert. Rin called it first. They're not attacking Earth. Harrow caught on. They're creating a dead zone so we can't follow. They're planning a final launch, Kale said grimly. And they want the galaxy to watch it happen. Kale made the call. He couldn't leave this to command chains or delays. He had to go there himself. For the first time since Aurora Dawn, he put on full assault armor, not for ceremony but for war. The black plating hissed as it sealed around him. His visor flickered to life, feeding tactical readouts, radiation indexes, environmental hazards. And somewhere beneath all the code, he could still feel the heat of Aurora Dawn's ashes. He boarded the Vanguard's Blade, Earth's fastest stealth corvette, and ordered it to follow the exact trajectory toward the enemy carrier. Sir, Rin's voice came in through the comms. You're putting yourself in the kill zone. I know. Then why? Because if we fail, Kale said, his voice flat, resolute, I want to look down upon the downfall and spit before it closes in. It took 13 minutes to reach the carrier. It was no longer hiding. The thing floated in space like a scar across the stars. Its armor shimmered with the distortion of space itself. Its main weapon, an Extinction-class solar lance, was already charging. The aim was precise. Earth. One shot, one strike, one end. But humanity had one chance. Using the Vanguard's cloaking field, Kale docked manually beneath the carrier's underbelly into a forgotten maintenance port too small for scanners to register. He exited alone, a railgun on his back, a demolition kit strapped to his thigh, and 20 minutes of oxygen in his suit. Inside, it was silent, no crew. The ship was entirely AI-operated, no emotion, no regret, just cold, relentless code. Kale made his way through the crawl spaces, guided only by partial maps from the Veli archives. One wrong turn would trip a security node, but he wasn't looking for a conflict. He was looking for the reactor, the heart. If he could breach it, he could shut the whole thing down. Maybe not destroy it, but stop the weapon from firing. The reactor was a room of nightmares. No sound, just a blue glow, liquid antimatter flowing through black-veined tubes, pulsing like a dark, alien heartbeat. One touch of heat, one destabilized charge, and it would take out half the system. And there it was, the launch mechanism wired directly into the core. Not automated, manual, Someone had to push the button, which meant this ship wasn't empty after all. Kale turned, his railgun raised. A figure stood in the doorway. Human, older, gray hair, a scar over one eye, combat armor from a different era, Concorde black operations. Kale recognized the face from old intelligence files. His name was Commander Valerius Thorn. Presumed eliminated 22 years ago after a deep space mission went silent. Thorn smiled faintly. Didn't think they'd send you. Kale kept his weapon steady. You work for them now. I work for no one, Thorn said. I keep balance. That was always the job. You call this balance? Kale gestured to the reactor core. Thorn shrugged. It ends conflicts. One final strike, no survivors, and no one wants to fight anymore. You think extinguishing Earth will bring peace? I think if Earth prevails, the galaxy burns, Thorn countered, his voice tired. Kale stepped closer. Then you've already lost. Thorn looked at him strangely, not angry, not even defensive, just weary. You ever wonder why they feared us so much? He asked. Why Earth was never truly allowed into the Concorde? Kale didn't answer. Because we're the only ones who still evolve, Thorn continued. They're all static. The Xylos haven't changed in 6,000 years. The Valthi, they're fading, clinging to memory. But us, we adapt. Every conflict, every scar, we become something new. Kale said nothing, letting him talk. And they fear that, Thorn said, because they know one day we'll outgrow them all. Then get out of our way. Thorn shook his head. I can't. I made a promise. So did I, Kale said. Then he pulled the trigger. The shot hit Thorn in the side, throwing him back into the console. Sparks flew. His armor cracked, but he wasn't neutralized. He lunged forward, activating the countdown. Too late, Thorn roared. 5 seconds. Kale dove at the core. 4. He ripped open the access panel. 3. Exposed the coolant valves. 2. Punched the override code from the Veli archive. 1. Shutdown initiated. Silence. The entire carrier dimmed, the weapon deactivated, the blue glow faded. Thorn stared up at Kale, coughing. You weren't supposed to prevail. Kale leaned in. That's the problem, he whispered. You all thought Earth was still asking permission. Then he secured Thorn's position and walked out. Back aboard the Indomitable, the carrier was now in tow, lifeless, stripped of power, its payload neutralized. Kale sent the final message to the Concorde. Your last weapon is gone. Your last bluff has failed. The age of your rule is over. Earth doesn't need a seat at your table. We've built our own. The transmission ended, broadcasting across the stars. No one answered, and that was how Kale knew it was finally done. Silence ruled the galaxy for the next 24 hours. No threats, no declarations, no last-minute retaliations. The once proud Concorde, who only weeks ago bombed Earth's colonies and laughed at their protests, had nothing left to say. Humanity had burned their mask. They had gutted their bluff. And now they stood in the quiet that follows a storm. The part no one talks about. The part where the survivors realize that just because the battle's over, the damage isn't. The Indomitable floated in low orbit over a Concorde capital moon, its weapons offline, its posture neutral. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to deliver terms, real ones, the kind that couldn't be rewritten with ink and loopholes, the kind sealed in blood and memory. Kale stood in the great negotiation chamber. A neutral site surrounded by dozens of holographic delegates, most no longer even bothered to hide their fear. Others wore masks of civility. 1 or 2 looked openly resentful. That was fine. Kale hadn't come here to be liked. He had come to finish what he started. The Veli Elder, the one who had given them the coordinates of the final weapon, opened the session with his slow, deliberate voice. Earth has rendered the dead world carrier inoperable, he said. It has claimed responsibility for the Concorde's destabilization, and it now presents its demands. Kale didn't step onto the central podium. He didn't need to. He just spoke. Calm, flat, cold. Earth doesn't want a throne. We don't want to rule you. Murmurs flickered. One delegate scoffed quietly. Kale looked right at him. "But we will never kneel again." That shut them up. He took a slow breath. His voice never rose, not once. "These are our terms. Every species complicit in the downfall of Aurora Dawn will release classified military archives, full disclosure, no edits. Every planet forcibly annexed from Earth's colonies will be returned with all infrastructure intact." He paused. "The Concord Charter will be burned publicly. You want peace, you earn it from the ground up. You don't get to decide who joins, who's worthy, who's civilized enough. That ends now." A delegate from the Mid-Core Republic, sweating visibly, raised a hand. "And if we refuse?" Kale smiled. Not warm, not cruel, just final. "Then Earth isolates you?" The delegate blinked. "That's it. You misunderstand." "We don't need you anymore," Kale said. He tapped a button. A second projection appeared, a trade map. Earth now had full trade agreements with the freeholds, the outer reaches, and the mid-galactic rim, shipping routes, energy exchanges, tech agreements. "We've built a coalition outside your control, a parallel economy, a new network, and we've secured our own AI Regulation Council, security agreements, medical exchanges." Another blink of the map. "You're not just cut off from Earth, you're obsolete." That was the decisive blow. It wasn't the weapons, it wasn't the carrier they had disabled. It was the fact that Earth no longer needed their approval, their currency, or their systems. Humanity was no longer orbiting them, they had become their own gravity. Some delegates panicked right then and there. Offers, bargains, speeches about mutual future and intergalactic unity, but Kale stopped them. "This isn't about punishment," he said. "It's about truth." He turned the hollow projector again and played the final video. Not a battle, not a strike, but the last transmission from an Aurora Dawn civilian, a mother holding her perishing child in the rubble of what used to be a home. She whispered into the camera, "Don't forget us." Then the image cut. The chamber went quiet. A few delegates looked away. Kale let the silence sit, heavy and unforgiving. "You did that," he said, "and you told us it was justified. You called it containing aggression." He stepped back. "This is your second chance. Not everyone gets one." They signed the Accord of Independence 1 hour later. Not all, a few abstained, but enough did. Enough to start again. And that night, as Kale looked down from the viewing bay, watching the fractured Concord limping forward, he felt no triumph, just weight, just gravity. The kind you feel when you realize you've become something more formidable than the adversary you vanquished. Admiral Harrow joined him later, as always. "The galaxy's changed," he said. "It had to," Kale replied. Harrow handed him a new data pad. "They want you to lead the coalition." Kale stared at the words. "Unified Terran Alliance Provisional Commander Nominee, Ambassador Kale Varen." "Tell them no," Kale said. Harrow frowned. "You sure?" Kale nodded. "I didn't come here to lead forever. I came to stop a conflict." "You stopped a galaxy." "Same thing." Kale looked out into the stars, trying to remember what it had felt like to believe in peace without a weapon pressed to someone's head. "I'll serve," he said, "but only until the new order stabilizes. Then someone else takes over." Harrow shrugged. "They won't like that." Kale turned to him. "I didn't come here to be liked." Harrow chuckled. "Still the same stubborn individual you were on day one." "No," Kale said, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his voice. "That guy still thought this place could be saved." The Accord of Independence was signed. 90 days passed. 90 days of strained silence from the former Concord, of quiet negotiations with new allies, of rebuilding and re-establishing trust. Kale, true to his word, oversaw the initial stabilization of the new unified Terran Alliance, ensuring the core tenets of their new galactic order were firmly established. Sovereignty, mutual respect, and swift, uncompromising justice for any aggressor. He delegated, advised, and slowly, deliberately, pulled himself back from the center of the storm he had created. He knew the galaxy needed a fresh face, someone unburdened by the fires of the recent past. someone who could build, not just fight. He was preparing for his final handoff to the newly appointed Chancellor of the UTA, a pragmatic diplomat from a liberated mid-core republic world, when the alarms shrieked. Not the usual tactical alerts or fleet movements. This was a deep space warning, a planetary defense beacon screaming a code never heard before. Kale was in his quarters on the Indomitable, packing personal effects, the Aurora Dawn video playing silently on his desk. He dropped his datapads and ran to the command bridge. Admiral Harrow was already there, face etched with a new, deeper concern. Lieutenant Rin stood stiffly at a console, her knuckles white. "Report!" Kale snapped, the old command tone returning instinctively. "Sir, deep space sensors, something's emerging from the void beyond the outer reaches," Rin stammered, her voice tight. "No energy signature, no conventional warp trail. It's a gravitational anomaly, too large to be natural." The main view screen flickered, trying to resolve the distant signature. What appeared wasn't a ship, not as they knew it. It was a vast, in-kai blackness, like a hole torn in the fabric of space, swallowing starlight. It moved with impossible speed, utterly silent, and it was heading directly for Earth's most vital new trade hub, the Nexus 7. "It just swallowed a recon drone, sir," Rin whispered, her eyes wide. "No explosion, no debris, it just vanished." Harrow slammed his fist on a console. "This isn't Concorde tech. This isn't anything we've ever cataloged. They have no warp signature, no FTL drive readings, nothing." Kale stared at the anomaly. A chill, unlike any he'd felt even facing the Dead World Protocol, snaked down his spine. This wasn't a species looking for resources or power. This felt primal. He felt the familiar weight of old armor settle on his shoulders again, the familiar taste of impending conflict in the air. "What is it?" Kale asked, his voice low. Harrow looked at him, then back at the approaching terror. "We don't know, Kale, but it just reacted to our long-range scans. It's accelerating." On the main screen, the black void suddenly pulsed, expanding slightly, and a faint, resonant hum, too deep to be heard, vibrated through the hull of the Indomitable. It was a sound that shook not just the ship, but the very soul. And from within that growing darkness, faint, geometric patterns of light began to coalesce, alien and terrifying. "Sir," Rin cried out, her voice barely a whisper. "Incoming data from the Veli, an emergency, uncoded transmission." Kale nodded. "Put it on screen." The Veli Elder's translucent form shimmered into existence, his ancient eyes wide with an emotion Kale had never seen on him. Pure, unadulterated dread. "Ambassador Varen," the Elder's voice rasped, devoid of its usual calm, "you must know you opened the gate. When you shattered the old Concorde, the vibrations, they reached beyond the known cosmos. They have awakened." He pointed a trembling hand towards the main view screen, where the in-kai blackness pulsed with alien geometry. "We called them the Voidkin. They feast on cosmic disharmony. Your war, it drew them, and now they come for all of us." The screen behind him glitched violently. The Veli Elder's image distorted, then vanished, replaced by the rapidly expanding blackness. The ominous hum intensified, resonating through Kale's bones. He looked at Harrow, then at Rin, their faces pale in the eerie light of the approaching anomaly. "Tactical assessment," Kale barked, his voice cutting through the growing terror. "Give me everything you have. Weapon solutions, evasion protocols." But Rin could only shake her head, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Sir, they're here. They're already engaging our perimeter, and our weapons, they're just passing through them." The great, silent blackness was upon them. From its depths, tendrils of darkness, impossibly long and sharp, reached out, bypassing shields, phasing through hulls. On the main screen, the first of Earth's defense vessels, positioned to protect the Nexus 7, shimmered, then crumpled inward as if an unseen hand had simply crushed it. No explosion, no fire, just a silent, complete collapse. Cale Varen, the man who had brought a galaxy to its knees, felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. They had known conflict. They had prevailed. But this was something else entirely, something beyond understanding, something that had been slumbering, awakened by the chaos they had wrought. The Indomitable shuddered, a new, sickening vibration running through its deck. "Incoming subspace signature," Rin screamed. It's a direct message, sir, from the anomaly." On the view screen, superimposed over the silent, devouring blackness, a single word formed, not in any known language, but somehow projected directly into their minds, chilling them to the core. "Hunger!" What unspeakable horror has Cale Varen unleashed upon the galaxy? Can even humanity, heck yeah, stand against a threat that consumes the very fabric of space? Don't miss the terrifying conclusion. Like this video, subscribe for more HFY tales, and tell us in the comments. If you had to face the Voidkin, what one human invention would you bring to the fight? The Accord of Independence was signed. 90 days passed. 90 days of strained silence from the former Concord, of quiet negotiations with new allies, of rebuilding and re-establishing trust. Cale, true to his word, oversaw the initial stabilization of the new unified Terran alliance, ensuring the core tenets of their new galactic order were firmly established. Sovereignty, mutual respect, and swift, uncompromising justice for any aggressor. He delegated, advised, and slowly, deliberately, pulled himself back from the center of the storm he had created. He knew the galaxy needed a fresh face, someone unburdened by the fires of the recent past, someone who could build, not just fight. He was preparing for his final handoff to the newly appointed Chancellor of the UTA, a pragmatic diplomat from a liberated mid-core Republic world, when the alarms shrieked. Not the usual tactical alerts or fleet movements. This was a deep space warning, a planetary defense beacon screaming a code never heard before. Cale was in his quarters on the Indomitable, packing personal effects, the Aurora Dawn video playing silently on his desk. He dropped his datapads and ran to the command bridge. Admiral Harrow was already there, face etched with a new, deeper concern. Lieutenant Rin stood stiffly at a console, her knuckles white. "Report!" Cale snapped, the old command tone returning instinctively. "Sir, deep space sensors, something's emerging from the void beyond the outer reaches," Rin stammered, her voice tight. "No energy signature, no conventional warp trail. It's a gravitational anomaly, too large to be natural." The main view screen flickered, trying to resolve the distant signature. What appeared wasn't a ship, not as they knew it. It was a vast, Inkai blackness, like a hole torn in the fabric of space, swallowing starlight. It moved with impossible speed, utterly silent, and it was heading directly for Earth's most vital new trade hub, the Nexus 7. "It just swallowed a recon drone, sir," Rin whispered, her eyes wide. "No explosion, no debris, it just vanished." Harrow slammed his fist on a console. "This isn't Concord tech. This isn't anything we've ever cataloged. They have no warp signature, no FTL drive readings, nothing." Cale stared at the anomaly. A chill, unlike any he'd felt even facing the Dead World Protocol, snaked down his spine. This wasn't a species looking for resources or power. This felt primal. He felt the familiar weight of old armor settle on his shoulders again, the familiar taste of impending conflict in the air. "What is it?" Cale asked, his voice low. Harrow looked at him, then back at the approaching terror. "We don't know, Cale, but it just reacted to our long-range scans. It's accelerating." On the main screen, the black void suddenly pulsed, expanding slightly, and a faint, resonant hum, too deep to be heard, vibrated through the hull of the Indomitable. It was a sound that shook not just the ship, but the very soul. And from within that growing darkness, faint, geometric patterns of light began to coalesce, alien and terrifying. "Sir," Rin cried out, her voice barely a whisper. "Incoming data from the Veli, an emergency uncoded transmission." Kale nodded. "Put it on screen." The Veli elder's translucent form shimmered into existence, his ancient eyes wide with an emotion Kale had never seen on him. Pure, unadulterated dread. "Ambassador Varen," the elder's voice rasped, devoid of its usual calm, "you must know you opened the gate. When you shattered the old Concord, the vibrations, they reached beyond the known cosmos. They have awakened." He pointed a trembling hand towards the main view screen, where the Inkai blackness pulsed with alien geometry. "We called them the Voidkin. They feast on cosmic disharmony. Your conflict, it drew them, and now they come for all of us." The screen behind him glitched violently. The Veli Elder's image distorted, then vanished, replaced by the rapidly expanding blackness. The ominous hum intensified, resonating through Kale's bones. He looked at Harrow, then at Rin, their faces pale in the eerie light of the approaching anomaly. "Tactical assessment," Kale barked, his voice cutting through the growing terror. "Give me everything you have. Weapon solutions, evasion protocols." But Rin could only shake her head, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Sir, they're here. They're already engaging our perimeter, and our weapons, they're just passing through them." The great, silent blackness was upon them. From its depths, tendrils of darkness, impossibly long and sharp, reached out, bypassing shields, phasing through hulls. On the main screen, the first of Earth's defense vessels, positioned to protect the Nexus 7, shimmered, then crumpled inward as if an unseen hand had simply crushed it. No explosion, no fire, just a silent, complete collapse. Kale Varen, the man who had brought a galaxy to its knees, felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. They had known conflict. They had prevailed. But this was something else entirely, something beyond understanding, something that had been slumbering, awakened by the chaos they had wrought. The Indomitable shuddered, a new, sickening vibration running through its deck. "Incoming subspace signature," Rin screamed. It's a direct message, sir, from the anomaly." On the view screen, superimposed over the silent, devouring blackness, a single word formed, not in any known language, but somehow projected directly into their minds, chilling them to the core. "Hunger!" What unspeakable horror has Kale Varen unleashed upon the galaxy? Can even humanity, heck yeah, stand against a threat that consumes the very fabric of space? Don't miss the terrifying conclusion. Like this video, subscribe for more HFY tales, and tell us in the comments. If you had to face the Voidkin, what one human invention would you bring to the fight? The Accord of Independence was signed. 90 days passed. 90 days of strained silence from the former Concord, of quiet negotiations with new allies, of rebuilding and re-establishing trust. Kale, true to his word, oversaw the initial stabilization of the new unified Terran alliance, ensuring the core tenets of their new galactic order were firmly established. Sovereignty, mutual respect, and swift, uncompromising justice for any aggressor. He delegated, advised, and slowly, deliberately, pulled himself back from the center of the storm he had created. He knew the galaxy needed a fresh face, someone unburdened by the fires of the recent past, someone who could build, not just fight. He was preparing for his final handoff to the newly appointed Chancellor of the UTA, a pragmatic diplomat from a liberated mid-core Republic world, when the alarms shrieked. Not the usual tactical alerts or fleet movements. This was a deep space warning, a planetary defense beacon screaming a code never heard before. Kale was in his quarters on the Indomitable, packing personal effects, the Aurora Dawn video playing silently on his desk. He dropped his datapads and ran to the command bridge. Admiral Harrow was already there, face etched with a new, deeper concern. Lieutenant Rin stood stiffly at a console, her knuckles white. "Report!" Kale snapped, the old command tone returning instinctively. Sir, deep space sensors, something's emerging from the void beyond the outer reaches. Rin stammered, her voice tight. No energy signature. No conventional warp trail. It's a gravitational anomaly, too large to be natural. The main view screen flickered, trying to resolve the distant signature. What appeared wasn't a ship, not as they knew it. It was a vast, inky blackness, like a hole torn in the fabric of space, swallowing starlight. It moved with impossible speed, utterly silent, and it was heading directly for Earth's most vital new trade hub, the Nexus 7. It just swallowed a recon drone, Sir, Rin whispered, her eyes wide. No explosion, no debris. It just vanished. Harrow slammed his fist on a console. This isn't Concorde tech. This isn't anything we've ever cataloged. They have no warp signature, no FTL drive readings, nothing. Kale stared at the anomaly. A chill, unlike any he'd felt even facing the Dead World Protocol, snaked down his spine. This wasn't a species looking for resources or power. This felt primal. He felt the familiar weight of old armor settle on his shoulders again. The familiar taste of impending conflict in the air. "What is it?" Kale asked, his voice low. Harrow looked at him, then back at the approaching terror. "We don't know, Kale, but it just reacted to our long-range scans. It's accelerating." On the main screen, the black void suddenly pulsed, expanding slightly, and a faint, resonant hum, too deep to be heard, vibrated through the hull of the Indomitable. It was a sound that shook not just the ship, but the very soul. And from within that growing darkness, faint, geometric patterns of light began to coalesce, alien and terrifying. "Sir," Rin cried out, her voice barely a whisper. "Incoming data from the Veli, an emergency, uncoded transmission." Kale nodded. "Put it on screen." The Veli Elder's translucent form shimmered into existence, his ancient eyes wide with an emotion Kale had never seen on him. Pure, unadulterated dread. "Ambassador Varen," the Elder's voice rasped, devoid of its usual calm, "you must know you opened the gate. When you shattered the old Concorde, the vibrations, they reached beyond the known cosmos. They have awakened." He pointed a trembling hand towards the main view screen, where the Inkai blackness pulsed with alien geometry. "We called them the Voidkin. They feast on cosmic disharmony. Your conflict, it drew them. And now they come for all of us." The screen behind him glitched violently. The Veli Elder's image distorted, then vanished, replaced by the rapidly expanding blackness. The ominous hum intensified, resonating through Kale's bones. He looked at Harrow, then at Rin, their faces pale in the eerie light of the approaching anomaly. "Tactical assessment," Kale barked, his voice cutting through the growing terror. "Give me everything you have. Weapon solutions, evasion protocols." But Rin could only shake her head, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Sir, they're here. They're already engaging our perimeter, and our weapons, they're just passing through them." The great, silent blackness was upon them. From its depths, tendrils of darkness, impossibly long and sharp, reached out, bypassing shields, phasing through hulls. On the main screen, the first of Earth's defense vessels, positioned to protect the Nexus 7, shimmered, then crumpled inward as if an unseen hand had simply crushed it. No explosion, no fire, just a silent, complete collapse. Kale Varen, the man who had brought a galaxy to its knees, felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. They had known conflict. They had prevailed. But this was something else entirely, something beyond understanding, something that had been slumbering, awakened by the chaos they had wrought. The Indomitable shuddered, a new, sickening vibration running through its deck. "Incoming subspace signature," Rin screamed. It's a direct message, sir, from the anomaly." On the view screen, superimposed over the silent, devouring blackness, a single word formed, not in any known language, but somehow projected directly into their minds, chilling them to the core. "Hunger!" Kale stared at the word, then at the approaching cosmic horror. This was the true consequence. Not a new galactic order, but a new, unquantifiable adversary. This was what the ancient Concord had, perhaps unknowingly, kept at bay through their rigid, stifling peace. The Veli's warning echoed in his mind. "You opened the gate!" He had shattered the old system, and something primordial had answered. "Hunger," Kale repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "They consume, they don't fight." Harrow slammed his palm on a console. "Then we give them something they can't digest. Rin, full fleet broadcast, uncoded, to every species. Every Concord member, every freehold, every neutral world. Tell them what approaches. Tell them what it means for every living thing." Rin nodded, her fingers flying across the console. The galaxy, still reeling from humanity's defiance, was about to face a far greater reckoning. "Sir," Rin said, her voice strained, "the Voidkin are breaching inner defenses. Our rail cannons are useless. They pass through our energy shields." Kale closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, the cold resolve returning. "They don't understand physical laws. They are a void, a tear in reality, but reality still exists, and so do we." He turned to Harrow. "Admiral, contact the Veli. They built the ancient cloaking systems, the ones Thorn used. They understand distortions in spacetime. What did they use to keep these things dormant?" Harrow nodded, barking orders. Rin was already scrambling new data, pulling up fragmented Veli archives. "Sir, historical records suggest the Veli created harmonic resonators, devices meant to stabilize localized spacetime. They sealed areas of cosmic disharmony." Kale's mind raced. "Disharmony, the Veli Elder said they feast on cosmic disharmony. Our conflict, it awoke them. What if we create harmony?" Harrow stared at him. "Ambassador, we're about to be consumed. There's no time for philosophy." "Not philosophy, Admiral," Kale countered, a wild spark in his eyes. "Applied physics. If their existence is based on a tier of vibration, then a counter-vibration, a resonant frequency, could disrupt them. Rin, how many of those harmonic resonators do we have schematics for? How quickly can we replicate them?" "Limited schematics, sir. Most were considered theoretical. And replication, it would take weeks, months, even with our new industrial capacity." "We don't have weeks," Kale said, his gaze fixed on the main screen where a massive Voidkin construct, a swirling vortex of nothingness, was beginning to envelop the Nexus 7 station. The station's lights flickered, then vanished, silent and complete. "We have minutes. Admiral, contact every former Concord science vessel, every freehold engineer. Send them the Veli schematics. Tell them to adapt, to improvise, to build. We need a galactic chorus, not just a Terran symphony." The gamble was immense. Humanity, having just dictated terms through overwhelming power, was now pleading for cooperation from the very species it had recently challenged. But the threat was universal. Messages flew across the unified Terran alliance and beyond. Desperate calls for shared knowledge, for a united effort. Many former Concord fleets, initially wary, saw the approaching terror and began to respond. The Xylos, masters of energy manipulation, repurposed their planetary shields into colossal energy emitters. The Draken, with their advanced material sciences, fashioned temporary resonant chambers from their ship hulls. Even the Nari, usually reclusive, offered their unique bioluminescent frequencies, which strangely seemed to cause minute disruptions in the Voidkin's outermost tendrils. A frantic, improvised network of science and engineering sprang to life. It was chaotic, untested, and terrifyingly swift. Kale, meant to be stepping down, found himself coordinating a galaxy-wide defense, not with rail cannons, but with frequency modulators and theoretical physics. "Admiral, we need to draw their attention," Kale ordered. "Something large, something with massive energy output, something to act as a tuning fork for our nascent harmonic array." Harrow looked at the Indomitable. "Sir, the flagship?" "She was built for this," Kale said, a grim determination setting his jaw. not just to fight the known, but to face the unknown. Plot a course. We are the bait. Lieutenant Rin's eyes welled with tears, but she nodded, punching in the coordinates. The Indomitable, once the symbol of humanity's defiance, now became the focal point of its desperate defense. As the Indomitable surged forward, a lone beacon into the approaching darkness, Kale took to the comms one last time. His voice, broadcast across every channel, was calm, resonating with a quiet authority that transcended species. To the unified Terran Alliance, to our Freehold allies, to the former Concord, and to every living being in this galaxy, you wanted war, you got it, but not the war we expected, not the war any of us wanted. His voice deepened. Today, we do not fight for territory, we do not fight for power. We fight for existence, for the right to draw another breath, for the quiet hum of stars in an unconsumed sky. He paused, letting the message sink in. Humanity never asked for this fight, but we will not yield, we will stand, we will adapt, and we will remind the universe that even against the deepest void there is always light. Synchronize harmonic frequencies, all vessels, all planets. Now. Across the galaxy, a cacophony of light and sound began. Repurposed shields shimmered with strange, stabilizing frequencies. Planetary defense grids, once meant for destruction, pulsed with life-affirming energy. From the smallest scout ship to the largest former Concord dreadnought, every vessel capable of projecting a modulated energy field contributed to the nascent, desperate song. The Voidkin reacted. The great blackness recoiled, its form rippling like disturbed water. The ominous hum intensified, becoming a shriek, a cosmic wail of agony and frustration. The geometric patterns on its surface fractured, distorting into jagged, unstable lines. For the first time, the consuming void seemed to be in pain. "It's working, sir," Rin shouted, triumph in her voice. "Their gravitational integrity is failing. They're being unwound." Tendrils of darkness, which had passed through physical matter with impunity, now shimmered and dissolved. The silent, crushing force faltered. But the Voidkin was ancient, vast, and powerful. It gathered its strength, its core pulsing with a malevolent light. "It's going to strike back," Harrow warned. "A focused counterwave." Kale saw it too. A single, concentrated point of pure nothingness forming at the Voidkin's center, aimed directly at the Indomitable. It was a final, desperate act of consumption. "Full power to the main deflector array," Kale roared. "Route all available energy. We hold the line." The Indomitable glowed, a supernova of defiant blue. The combined, chaotic yet harmonized frequencies from across the galaxy converged, channeled through Earth's flagship. The wave of nothingness slammed into the Indomitable. The ship groaned, hull plating screaming, systems failing. Kale felt the deck buckle beneath his feet, the very atoms of the ship vibrating as if trying to tear themselves apart. But humanity had always known how to bend without breaking. They had always found a way to take the impossible and make it merely improbable. The raw, desperate, unified energy of a galaxy fighting for its life held. The Indomitable, scarred but unbroken, shimmered, absorbing the impossible impact. And then, with a final, shuddering wail that echoed across the subspace channels, the Voidkin began to recede. The blackness contracted, the terrifying geometries dissolved, and with a silent, impossible implosion, it vanished, leaving behind only the cold, empty vacuum of space. A stunned silence fell over the Indomitable's bridge. Then, distant cheers erupted through the comms. The galaxy, for the first time in its recorded history, truly united, had prevailed. Days later, the great negotiation chamber, once the stage for Kale's defiance, now held a different gathering. Holographic delegates from every corner of known space, including the Xylos and Draken, sat alongside Freehold and Midcore Republic representatives. The Veli Elder, his form less transparent now, almost solid with purpose, opened the session. "The Voidkin have retreated," he said, his voice stronger than before. "They are not vanquished forever, but they are contained, and the galaxy endures, thanks to the Terran Accord." Kale stood, not on the podium, but among the other delegates. He wore a simple, unadorned uniform, the weight of command finally lifted. "Earth doesn't want a throne," Kale said, his voice calm, tired, yet resolute. "We don't want to rule you, we want to live alongside you, as equals." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, but this time they were not of scorn, but of genuine acknowledgement. "Our terms for the Accord of Independence still stand," Kale continued. "But now we add a new one, a charter of universal defense and shared knowledge, a pledge that no species will ever again face an existential threat alone. A promise that the old divisions, the old hatreds, end here. Today, we begin to build a true alliance, not of fear, but of shared purpose." He looked around the chamber, meeting every gaze. "You wanted conflict, and you got it. A conflict that nearly consumed us all, but it showed us that even against the greatest darkness, our light, when united, can shine brighter than any star." Admiral Harrow stood beside him, a rare, proud smile on his face. Lieutenant Rin, now a decorated commander, stood at the new central console, ready to begin the work of building a truly unified galactic defense. Kale concluded, "I am stepping down from my command of the unified Terran Alliance, effective now. My mission is complete. The galaxy has found its footing. It is time for others to lead." No one objected. Not now. His legacy wasn't a throne, but the very existence of their future. Weeks later, Kale stood on a small, unassuming starship, charting a course for an unclaimed sector in the fringe. No parades, no send-off. Just Lieutenant Rin, now Chancellor Rin, on the comms. "You're really doing it, sir?" she asked, her voice tinged with emotion. "Yes, Chancellor," Kale replied, the title feeling strange on his tongue. "You've got the harder job now?" "Perhaps," she chuckled. "But at least I won't be the one the Voidkin, remember?" He paused, then smiled faintly. "No, that memory is mine to carry." He left that same night. For the first few weeks, he didn't speak to anyone, didn't answer transmissions, didn't check the news feeds. He just drifted. There was a kind of healing in that drifting, not escaping, just uncoiling. Like a spring finally unwinding after being wound too tight for too long. Eventually, he found a place. A planet with no name, just a designation. Temperate, untamed. A few scattered settlers, no real infrastructure. The kind of place you go when you're done trying to be someone important. He bought a small plot of land, built a home out of repurposed alloys and old scrap. And for the first time in decades, he planted something. Actual seeds, not ideology, not orders, just food. Tomatoes, potatoes, grain that would take years to mature. No one cared who he was out here, and he never told them. But sometimes he'd get visitors. A pilot who once flew with Earth's black operations. A Veli youth who'd grown up reading about the conflict. A freehold merchant who remembered the time Earth first broadcasted its demands. And every time they came, they'd ask the same thing. "Do you regret it?" Kale would always pause before answering. Because the truth was, sometimes, yes, he regretted how it had to be done. He regretted the chaos. He regretted that something terrible had to be awakened for the galaxy to truly see clearly, but he never regretted doing it. Because without it, humanity would still be begging. They would still be bleeding. And the galaxy, for all its ancient wisdom, would have been consumed in silent, ignorant harmony. 10 years passed. Rin sent messages now and then. Harrow retired quietly. The new coalition grew, colonies rebuilt, some worlds left, others joined, but no one threatened them again. No one insulted Earth in those chambers anymore. And no one ever forgot what happened at Aurora Dawn, nor the cost of awakening the Voidkin. They turned Aurora Dawn into a memorial now. Kale never visited. He didn't have to. Because every time he looked at the sky from his quiet little porch, he remembered that child, that parent, that city turned to dust, because some alien race thought fear was the only language worth speaking. And then he remembered how humanity answered. They didn't answer with mercy. They didn't answer with compromise. They answered with a declaration that shattered the stars and, in doing so, forged a new future. They answered in the only voice the galaxy would understand. You wanted war. You got it. And now the galaxy had a chance to build something better together. If you enjoyed Kale's journey from diplomat to reluctant galactic savior, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more humanity. Heck yeah! Sci-fi stories? Tell us in the comments below. What was your favorite moment from Kale's story, and what challenges do you think the new unified Terran Alliance will face next?